creativity and scale to give female talent a voice. Smirnoff decided it wasn't enough just to condemn the sidelining of female artists. It had to drive action and transform the industry. And to do this, Smirnoff created Equalising Music, a global gender equality program aimed at doubling the number of female talent in just 3 years.
Wow, ambitious task. How did it play out?
Smirnoff partnered with legendary music giants Vice and Spotify to launch the campaign on March 8th, International Women's Day. They asked other industry folks like Pitchfork, iHeartRadio, Delta Group, Mixmag, Thump, Gordian and Somnia to sign a pledge to increase female representation across performance bookings, exposure in media and music availability.
That list has got some clout.
It gets better. Smirnoff and Vice then co-created a list of the top 50 women making noise, as well as producing the documentary Equalising Music. This looked at the challenges women face in music through the eyes of Chicago's Black Madonna and Uganda's DJ Rachel, and lived on Vice's Content Hub and other partner websites for a bigger reach.
How did Smirnoff work with Spotify?
Between them, they co-curated Smirnoff's top 50 playlists, driving listeners to exclusive content such as local DJ events and behind-the-scenes videos. Content was promoted on YouTube and across Broadly, Thump, Noisy, and of course Vice and Spotify, all targeting people particularly engaged in gender equality, EDM and IWD. And using in-stream and TrueView discovery ads, Smirnoff managed to truly capitalise on the cultural moment of International Women's Day to create awareness for the cause and brand on a global scale.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Fiona said, my name is Rob Smithson. I'm one of the strategy partners at Carat, and I work across the Diageo portfolio, with Diageo being one of our largest and most valuable global clients. But before I introduce some of the brilliant panelists we've got today, and before we get stuck into some, what I hope will be some provocative and some insightful conversations, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we see our clients and their agency partners, whether they be creative agencies or media agencies, experiential agencies, any kind of agencies. What are the kind of challenges that they face when it comes to working with large global media platforms such as Spotify? Because we live in a world now where global media platforms are really becoming part of the fabric of culture, and they're becoming parts of our everyday lives. And you know, we don't actually seek them out anymore. We actually carry them around with us. So if you think about it, any single song you ever want to listen to, any TV show or movie you ever want to watch, any products you ever want to buy is right there in your pocket and just one click away. And as such, these platforms are becoming so important for brands when they start building a story out to consumers. And when you also add on top of that, the amount of rich and insightful data that the platforms have into the consumers that we want to reach, the fact that they now have the scale to reach them across borders, and they're increasingly having the creative firepower to develop really impactful activations that are going to grow the business, they're becoming, as I say, that key part of a brand's ecosystems. So it's really important for us as we move forward to work out what is the best way that we can work with these partners to get the best out for the brand, both culturally and commercially. So, my panel, they're going to help me do this. I would like to introduce them. First of all, we have Luke Atkinson. Luke is the VP for Smirnoff Global Content and Communication, and he was the lead client behind the partnerships that we put together between Carat, Spotify, and of course Smirnoff. He's going to be talking about how we've evolved that partnership. Angela Salk is going to be representing the global media platforms, in this case obviously Spotify, and she is the global head of agency partnerships at Spotify. I'm really pleased to have Jennifer Zinnemann here, who is the global chief strategy officer at McGowie Bowen, and she's going to be talking about the role of the creative agency, and I think that is really, really important. And then finally, I'm actually delighted to have Hester Prim here on the panel as well. Hester is a New York-based DJ, author, and music curator who works directly with brands. And I think that's really important because not only are brands increasingly moving to global partners, they're also working with people such as Hester to help them tell their stories through consumers. So hopefully we're going to cover about collaboration across all parties and how we need to drive that. We're going to talk about the vital importance of a brand idea or point of view and how without that nothing's really going to work. And then hopefully we're going to maybe challenge and look at some of the existing agency models and are they fit for purpose when we're coming to develop things like that. So, we're very conscious the panel before your first glass of rosé. So we're going to shoot through that one today. Okay, so what I'd like to start with is actually having a look at what we think as the panel are the key component parts of a really successful partnership. So Luke, I'm going to pass that one over to you straight away.
Thanks, Rob. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Luke. So I think the thing that's right at the core of a great partnership, I think from a client perspective, from a brand perspective, starts at being really, really sharp as to where in culture you want to play and what difference that you want to make in that part of culture. The reason I want to start somewhere as foundational as that is that the world of brand partnerships is a vast and somewhat daunting place and can really very, very quickly become about numbers and deals and really reaching eyeballs. And while of course that's all going to be really, really fundamentally important to the negotiation of the deliverables and the CPMs and all that good stuff, like really, really great collaboration, I think, starts to come from a client and a brand being really, really clear as to where in the world it wants to show up and what difference that it wants to make. Because when it's really, really clear on that, then I think it starts to enable much more purposeful and kind of culturally collaborative conversations with partners. And when a conversation starts based on that, then you can get to much more interesting and exciting, I think, ideas and shared passion with the partners that you want to work with. And so then the responses that you're getting back from your partners are ones that are born from a shared love of the culture that you both want to contribute and make a difference to. Smirnoff has got a long history, as the case study pointed out, a bit of contributing to music culture. There's some kind of greater specificity I'm sure we'll get into around the role of women within that and how that does or does not contribute to the culture inside of music. And given that the state of essentially the structure of the Smirnoff business and where we source our volume from, there's a really strong commercial case for focusing in on music culture and specifically the role of women within that culture and really aiming to make a difference from it. That is a really, really great start point to then go to partners like Spotify, like artists, like media agencies and creative agencies, and really asking the question, what can we do to make a difference?
I think that's really clear, actually. Having that clear role in culture is so important. Angela, for you, from a platform point of view, what are you looking for in a partnership with a brand?
So I'm going to build off of everything Luke said, actually, and say that to be able to do everything that Luke is talking about, you need to do it upstream. Too often what happens from a partnership perspective is that as a platform, we're asked to execute something instead of actually create something together. And when we're working upstream and creating something together, we fundamentally can change our narrative. We can actually influence and we can deliver excellence that when you ask us to just be a point on a media plan, it's really hard. It doesn't mean that we can't do it, but we need, from a partnership perspective, to work further upstream, to have common goals, common core values, and that really allows us to deliver something that we just can't do when we're an afterthought versus being an integral part of the partnership.
So I think that's really interesting as well, because Hester, from your point of view, as a key contributor, what do you look for? Because Angela's saying about being right in there at the beginning. Luke's talking about being absolutely clear on the role of the way we want to play in culture. But you, from an artist point of view, what do you see? What do you look for?
I was nodding so emphatically with what you were saying because it's true. I think when I started DJing for brands, which is now 90% of my work is DJing and curating for brands, it was really more just hiring me to do an event. And I would always say to these brands when I first started speaking to them 5 years ago, what are we trying to do? Who's going to be there? What's the point? What story are we trying to tell? One of the very first, very big things I did for Spotify was when Kendrick Lamar put out his record before this one, and he was having such a moment, and they created this big activation at South by Southwest. I don't know how many were there. And I remember asking that question, what are we doing? And the point was, well, we're celebrating Spotify and we're celebrating Kendrick because they're both in this place where they're about to just explode. And I remember I DJ'd a set up and down the California coast, so all California artists and all genres. And after the set, I went and met him, and he said, "Oh, you were the girl who made the California set. That was so cool." But I love to be called in like I am now. On the beginning, at the very beginning now, I get called and they say, this is what we're doing, this is who we're trying to reach, this is the story we're trying to tell. How can we use music to do that? What are your ideas? And when we build it from the bottom, it's so much more successful and so much more exciting creatively.
Definitely. But let's actually just talk about the partnerships that you guys have been doing with Smirnoff and around equalising music and stuff for the International Women's Day. Luke, obviously, we've moved that partnership on. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the learnings that you have about what was really good about the partnerships that you've been doing, what could have been better, different ways of working, perhaps?
Sure. So the case study that we just saw was from last year. And so while we were really, really happy with that work, ultimately that work manifested itself in a partnership with two really, really amazing women DJs, DJ Rachel from East Africa and the Black Madonna from Chicago, and we created content and some activations around that work. And there was a lot, I think, that was great about that work. It made a difference to the culture, it put a conversation out there, so on and so forth, and it created a platform that we could PR and give some really great playlists on Spotify that were about the 50 best female women DJs out there, which is all well and great, but it wasn't really, I'd say, an action at its core. And so and I think the downside of that is that we're just kind of telling stories and we're kind of pushing messages at people, as opposed to then really asking ourselves the question, right, so if there is a fundamental issue with women representation in music, then what are things that we could do that would open up the eyes of our consumers to that issue and add value to a consumer's listening experience in a way that feels right for Smirnoff? And so that was really the kind of the core question that we then took to Carat and took to Spotify, recognizing that these guys, of course, have like the largest catalogue of women artists, and recognizing that these guys know who is listening to what, where, and when, and what predilections that's based on the music that you like, and going, right, so what could we do that would have value for a listener to really unlock that experience that we can then tell stories around, promote, and get PR around, thus we can build essentially a model of effectiveness around, i.e. get something that's got some real scale around it, and we got to something that we think is really exciting. Do you want to talk about what the idea is? Yeah.
So what was the beauty of what Luke's talking about was it allowed us to go to our data set, which is very diverse, very large, and it allowed us to uncover unconscious behaviors that we didn't realize. And even myself, actually, once we started doing this as a female, I didn't realize my own unconscious behaviors in terms of how I skewed towards listening to male artists more so than female artists. Yet there are so many strong female artists out there. So the beauty of what we were able to do was use data and insight. But what you did was you guys came to us with this amazing challenge and really didn't put a lot of parameters. It was like, go see if you can uncover something for us And if you can, let's see what we can do about it. And I think that's really where the beauty of the activation and the ability to live year over year is coming from, is that as we continue to be able to leverage our data, we can actually still uncover insights that are relative to your core cultural, assets that you want to deliver as Smirnoff. And that's where this has really become a beautiful partnership. And the ability for it to live beyond the Spotify platform as well and really be a part of Smirnoff's DNA is where we thought it really kind of all culminated and came together.
I think, Angela, just, from my point of view, I thought it was only Spotify could have had that level of insight and data into all of your listeners and what they're listening to. And I think you were saying, when you actually looked at it, you saw that the unconscious bias even within the platform itself.
Exactly.
And that's what I was saying earlier. Without tapping into that data, the insights that we're going to get are always going to be at the top. And with these partnerships, we're allowed to go really, really deep with our insights based on the data.
Exactly. But just really quickly, so if Smirnoff had come to us and said, we want to target women, and we want to target women of a certain age group, we wouldn't have been able to uncover the insight that we did. So it's really important that we take a step back sometimes and don't come with an agenda, but we come with an idea and the ability to kind of leverage the insights together and see what we can cultivate instead of actually saying, because it's very easy, you could have said, we're on year 2 of the campaign. We want to talk to women. We want to find a way to empower women. And what we would have come up with is totally different. So, again, it goes back up to that upstream and thinking differently as to how you approach your challenge together.
I mean, I think that's a perfect time for Jen to come in here because we've just started to touch on ideas and how important they are and how they need to exist outside of execution. So, as someone from the creative agency, I'd love to get your insight into how you would approach these sort of things.
Yeah. Oh, hi. I'm loud. The world is changing for creative agencies and the role that we play. And I think the irony is not lost on me that down the road in indoor at the Palais, creative executional excellence is still being celebrated. But the truth is, what a creative agency needs to do increasingly is provide a point of view that partners can galvanize around and that everybody can sort of participate in. So rather than sort of executional preciousness, which some agencies, not mine, but some agencies are often accused of, what it really needs to be is about the generosity of an idea, the clarity of an idea, but the generosity of it, not looking at the platforms or your media partners or channels as a way to push stuff out, but really, or influencers or talent, really thinking about how you can leverage those assets to augment and take the core idea to new places. So we're really, in my view, kind of an interesting turning point for the industry and the role of a creative agency in driving these ideas forward.
I think that idea becoming the North Star that sits above absolutely everything and everybody is so important, and you can't do that off a simple executional idea. It has to be an idea that is rooted in culture, is rooted in your consumer, and then actually creativity can come from absolutely anywhere, as long as you all know what direction you're trying to go for.
We always say, when you know what you believe, you know how to behave. And I think rather than having a single agency behave or try to develop those ideas, increasingly you need to have that clarity of belief so everybody knows what direction we're rowing in, and then everyone needs to get an oar and pull, right? So.
And hopefully all in the same direction as well. That helps. But I think also it builds on the ideas that we talk a lot about channel ecosystems. And actually, maybe we should look at it slightly differently. We should be looking at idea ecosystems. And where an idea can live and how it manifests itself can be very, very different across different kind of channels and platforms, but it's still doing the same job versus the consumer, I suppose. You know, and I think that's crucial.
Yeah, we actually use that language a lot, the idea ecosystem. And how do you find a way to, instead of keep it tight, you know, because the other thing that's changing is the command and control. You know, in the States, it's like the lead agency. It's the lead idea. That needs to be dimensionalized in different ways. So rather than command and control, it's really about expansion and galvanization. And the partners become critical to do that. You know, nobody can do this alone. The world is really complex. CMOs, clients are really trying to figure out, how do I navigate this? And it's our strong belief, our strong perspective that it's idea-led, but then dimensionalized and not executionally based and contained.
I mean, Hester, you've been working, as I say, for the last few years, almost exclusively with brands, helping them tell some stories. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how you've identified with the brand what they want to say and how you've used music to bring that to life?
Yes, listening to you all speak, if I could get my hands on those insights, Angela, oh my God, the damage I could do. When we were talking about this, I thought I would illustrate one example of how I worked with a brand to really tell the story. Cadillac Escalade did a partnership with Bose, where they brought the Bose speakers inside the Cadillac, and there were a few agencies working on it, and they came up with this great idea of having the automobile inside of a showroom with the DJ opposite of it, lit by the headlights, and they brought in all of the press. It was like a private press event for about 30 different press outlets. And they called me at that point, which was really the beginning, so that was really exciting. And they said, we want to give each of these demos an authentic experience of how their readers will use this system, with the focus being on how fabulous the Bose speaker system is, which we all know it's pretty great. And I got to really see behind the curtain, because they said, we have 3 main targets. We have, and I hope this is okay to say, but we have, like the soccer mom who's reading Cosmo. We have the real car guys who are like the car and driver guys, and then we have sort of like the hip hop community led by like Double XL. And they gave me a list of who all of the magazines were, and they each came in for like a 4 to 5 minute set. So they would open the car doors, and the magazine came in, and I said, okay, here's Double XL. The lights went on, and I was right there. And so I played them a short hip-hop set, and I led it with Outkast, 2 Dope Boys in a Cadillac. And so it was really great, and they got to really hear it the way they would hear it, hear the music that was hot that their readers were reading about, but also I gave it that Cadillac sort of like wink, and it was a fun experience. And then I guess your soccer moms came in, and that was when Royals was on the radio all the time, the Lord song, "We're driving Cadillacs in our dreams." So I led with that, and then played Katy Perry in like a really accessible, fun, pop, middle-of-the-road mix, and that was great. And then we did Car and Driver, and I led with Pink Cadillac, the Bruce Springsteen version, and gave them a few minutes of what it would feel like to be in the Cadillac with that system for their reader. Now, I do all of this in a kind of analog, old-school way, because I'm a vinyl DJ with an encyclopedic knowledge of music. Had I had access to some Spotify insights, that probably would have been a lot easier and more exciting. But I guess that's really the human touch that I'm bringing. And I can tell another story, but to be careful of time. Right. I love working with a brand at that moment where they tell me what they want to do, and I can use music to really illustrate the example and make that experience.
And they're not giving you an execution, trying to go do something with that. They're giving you an idea. And build upon it.
And then let me do my thing.
Yeah. Luke, can I just bring it back to you? Is this a whole new sort of ways of approaching partnerships and stuff? For someone that works at a large multinational company, how did you go about managing different stakeholders within your organisation for a slightly different approach? Is it something easy or is it something challenging?
It's definitely not easy. So I think, so we spoke a lot about culture, like external culture. I think how that connects into your internal culture and having, like beliefs and values. I think so. I think number one, if you've got a brand and you've essentially gathered a bunch of people around that brand that really believe in that culture and in those beliefs, and they want to go and do that kind of work. That's a pretty galvanizing thing. And then I think you have like a bunch of what I call like brand activists, like internal activists that kind of want to get after and do cool shit and make a difference. And I think that's kind of number one critical thing. I think the number two is, of course, having a great idea, like as everyone then responds to. Like if you've got a great idea, everyone gets involved in it. But I think there's a danger that if you start to engage stakeholders when you've got the idea, they feel like they're getting sold to a little bit. So just like, you know, you need to bring people on, bring external partners on early, I think you need to bring internal partners on early as well. So then really, like, you know, everybody feels like it's their idea, and that you know, I'm a global guy, right? So everything that I do is in theory until a market puts it into practice, right? And so I have to be very, very cognizant of that and work with my market. So then when they go and do something with it, they feel like it's theirs because it's their practice, right? And then I'm just someone that's just hopefully making their life easier and orchestrating stuff for them. But I think if you can get those beliefs and like make it feel like it's their own, and then you could give them an idea that they can really get behind, then you can get magic happening.
Yeah, perfect. And Jen, just like, how do you think the creative agencies are maybe changing their structures or their ways of working to bring this to life? Because it is a bit of a shift from, as you said, other agencies' work.
It's a huge shift, and I think here's the thing, right? The most valuable thing creative agencies can give to any client is an idea platform, and yet creative agencies are not paid to give clients an idea platform. They're paid to execute. So the current agency structure, which is long-standing and very ingrained, requires me to executionally compete with everybody up here versus collaborate through an idea. Because we still only get paid for what we make, not for what we kind of create collectively. And I think, you know, the biggest frustration with clients that we encounter is like, how do we make this more seamless? What's going to need to change at some point is the compensation structure. Because nobody likes to work for free, and we all work for somebody. And I think, you know, the economic pressure on the industry will create a selfishness among creative agencies to keep it all close and keep it, you know, in-house versus do service to the ideas, which is to let it all out and let it be, you know, let it be expansive through that point of view I'm describing. But it's going to take a fundamental shift in how creative agencies work, are engaged, and are compensated. It's a very different model.
And I think you're also going to need a very brave client to want to
Any
change
brave clients out there?
their model. But I mean, Luke, can I just bring that back to you as well? To be a brave client, mate. No, around that, you know, Jen's saying, talking about sort of maybe a different compensation model based on the primacy of an idea rather than execution. Do you think there's going to be a change in the way media agencies are remunerated in this area around partnerships? Or would you approach a media agency, try and work with them differently? What do they need to bring to the table that they're currently maybe not doing? That's for you, Luke.
I was like, that one's you.
Thanks.
I was going to finish on a difficult one.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, you know, look, I've worked in agencies, but I am I know the business model of manufacturing and selling spirits, and I'm disinclined to comment too much on how I think agencies should rebuild their business models. I'm not really sure I know the answer to that, but certainly I think what you're describing is right. Like, where is value, and what makes the biggest difference in terms of delivering return, I think is really, really important. And I think there are competitors that are increasingly turning up in the agency world that probably are doing a better job of protecting their value proposition, and maybe there's something to be learned from there. And also, I think, you know, increasingly we want our message to feel native on the platforms that it's getting executed on, right? And so then that means that we're going to be just as likely to want to talk to Spotify as we are to our creative agency partners and our media agency partners. I think thus, if there is a magic model out there that can be built around unlocking and delivering value based on purposeful partnership, right, and what that delivers against the bottom line, then I think that then the opportunity for what that could lock in terms of creativity and partnership would be, I think, could be a real game changer, and is probably the biggest existential question that this entire festival needs to answer.
So we'll try and nail that one in the next couple of minutes.
Good luck,
But I
guys.
think absolutely, but I think it just comes back down to that collaboration and everybody having the same end goal in mind, and how then agencies can break their own silos and say, how can we best work together to actually develop platforms and programs that's going to drive business growth. At the end of the day, if we're demonstrating that we're driving business growth, yeah, we're all going to be in a much better place. Which is then just like, Angela, just the last one from me around how we talked quite a bit the last few minutes about agencies, platforms. How are you guys changing to work better with, whether it be the media agency, who will always, at the end of the day, be the conduit between the client and the media platform, you know, and then also how you're building your creativity?
So we, as an agency team for Spotify, have started to diversify who we work with and how we work with them. So we've actually started building out a vertical team to be working directly with clients, creating centers of excellence and opportunities where we can bring more value as the platform to be able to really deliver, whether it's for the agency or the client. And we see them both as equal partners, equal clients, and how we serve them, right? So from our perspective, it's all about the collaboration upstream. And again, centered around the no agenda, not around an execution, around an idea. And when you can bring that upstream together to what all of my panelists have been saying and really fundamentally change it for the end goal to be that common idea that is centered around something that is the marriage for all, regardless of the platform, or, you know, and delivers against the brand, that's where the success is going to be. But to be fair, we're not going into the creative business, right? That's not what our intention is. Our intention is stronger collaboration with our agency partners, to ensure that we can deliver creatively, both on the platform and off the platform, for ideas like we did with Smirnoff.
Thank you. And I think, just probably to finish, I think there's really finish on one word. It's collaboration. And it's everybody just stops working in their silos and starts working together. And everybody starts working very early in the process, right from the very beginning, to a very clear objective with a very clear idea. That's the way everybody's going to get to the best kind of work. So we're going to ask if anybody wants to ask any questions from the floor, or does everyone just want to go and have a glass of rosé?